Good morning to everyone, and we've just hit 10 o'clock. So welcome to our practical Parsha session. Nice to have you all here. Whether you are tuning in on Zoom or you are tuning in on Facebook Live, or you are going to be watching this after the session as the link is shared, welcome and thank you for joining. So nice to have you all online with us. Those of you that are watching live, feel free to post your questions or your comments throughout the class, and I'll be very happy to address them as we go along. And the truth is, those who watch on Facebook later can do the same. Okay, today's topic is, are you emotional or are you intellectual? That's the question. Are you emotional or are you intellectual? The truth is that everyone's a bit of both. Everyone's a little bit emotional, everyone's a little bit intellectual. We all have brains, we all have hearts that motivate our intellect and motivate our emotion. Often the question is, which one are you more of? Are you more of an intellectual or are you more of emotional? The interesting thing is that this question actually dates back millennia. It takes us back to the times of the Jewish people in Egypt. That's as far back as this discussion goes back. And it ties into this week's Torah portion because this week we read about the first paragraph of the Shema. V'ahavta et Hashem Elokecha, you should love Hashem your God. And there we're discussing in that paragraph both the intellectual as well as the emotional. What I want to do today is I'd like to share with you a PowerPoint and will help us with some text. So you can follow along with me and see what I'm referring to. So here we go. Right. So here is the first paragraph of the Shema, right? Interestingly to note is that Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto La'olam Va'ed, that verse that we say after the Shema, actually does not even feature in the Chumash. That was an additional phrase that was added into the paragraph. It's for another time why we say it as part of our davening, but it doesn't feature. We go straight from the Shema into the paragraph of the Ahavta. Okay, now what I want to focus on is the second last verse. If I pull up my cursor, I'll be able to show you on the screen. Here we go. Ukshartam le'ot ayodecha. You should bind them as a sign upon your hand. V'hayu totafot beinenecha. And they shall be as a reminder between your eyes. That is an instruction regarding the mitzvah of tefillin. Now, although both men and women say this paragraph, although tefillin is generally put on by the men because it's a time-bound mitzvah, and time-bound mitzvahs are specifically designated for men. Women have other obligations, and therefore they're not tied to these specific mitzvot. Nonetheless, men and women read this paragraph because the message of the tefillin is one that's eternal. You should bind them as a sign upon your hand, and they should be a reminder between your eyes. Now, interesting that this instruction was actually given to the Jewish people. They received this instruction at the time of the Exodus out of Egypt. It goes back all the way then, even before Mount Sinai, even before the 10 Commandments were given. We already received the mitzvah of tefillin. There were other mitzvahs that we received as well. We received the mitzvah of the Paschal Lamb, right? Offering the Paschal Lamb on preparation for the Exodus. Or, for example, we learn about the sanctification or dedication of the firstborn before the Exodus. Why is that? Because as God was preparing for the 10th plague, the killing of the firstborn, God told us that your firstborn will be dedicated to me because of that. We have the mitzvah of not eating chametz. It says when you arrive to the promised land, you should abstain from eating chametz for 7 days of Pesach as you tell over the story of the Exodus. These are various mitzvahs that we were given as a nation before we left Egypt. But suddenly, God gave us this mitzvah of tefillin. There he says that, and not just in this paragraph. Apologies for that background noise. Not just in this paragraph was it said. The mitzvah of tefillin actually features, this is one place. It's mentioned a number of places throughout Torah, the putting on tefillin. And the first time it's mentioned is actually at the Exodus out of Egypt. So the question is, why was it so relevant then? Why is it so relevant? Just before the nation leaves Egypt. We understand why God had to command us about the Paschal lamb and about Brit Milah, also circumcision, because he had to be circumcised in order to participate in the Paschal lamb, and the mitzvah of the firstborn, and the mitzvah of not eating chametz. It's all related to the Exodus, to leaving Egypt. But why do we have to receive a mitzvah about tefillin? Of all mitzvot, tefillin was told to us at the time of the leaving of Egypt. That's the interesting question. If you want to go to the next slide here, 1 second. So there we go. Okay, so in 1967, just before the 6-Day War, the entire world Jewish world was focusing on Israel. And Israel was under huge risk of annihilation from enemies from around its country. And in New York, the Rebbe spoke. And the Rebbe spoke then and launched a new campaign called the Tefillin campaign. Now, obviously, this is a mitzvah that's a lot younger, a lot older than the 6-Day War, 1967. As I said, this mitzvah was given to us as we were getting ready to leave Egypt. But the Rebbe started a campaign. And the campaign was in merit of Israel, in merit of the soldiers, in merit of our brothers and sisters living in Israel and going through their difficult time. We've got to encourage as many people to put on tefillin. Whether they're going to be regulars or not, that's up to them. Whether it's going to be every day or not, that's up to them. But it's important for us to focus on the mitzvah of tefillin. And when we focus on the mitzvah of tefillin, right, that will help our brothers and sisters in Israel. Okay? Now, the Rebbe addressed this. The Rebbe addressed this question. Why specifically tefillin? And as you can see on the text in front of you, the question could be answered. The Rebbe asked that question. Why am I focusing specifically on tefillin as the mitzvah that's going to protect us as a nation, as a people? And he said the question can be answered based on the verse. It says in the Pasuk, all the nations of the world will see that the name of God is called upon you, and they will fear you. That is a verse in the Torah. And look what the Talmud says. Here the Rebbe explains. Tefillin was important during the Exodus because this Exodus had the potential of becoming the final redemption of Mashiach as well. When they left Egypt, that final redemption of Egypt had the potential of being the Messianic time. And despite the fact that this did not come to be, the Exodus is still the spiritual source for all redemptions which follow. Just as all exiles stem from the original exile in Egypt, so too all redemptions stem from the original redemption of Egypt, through the final and true redemption of the righteous Mashiach. The verse states regarding the final redemption, as in the days that you left Egypt, I will show you wonders. In other words, in the future. So the Rebbe says, in other words, the greatest fulfillment of the above mentioned verse, the nations of the world will see and they will fear you, will take place with the arrival of Mashiach. So why is tefillin so important? Because tefillin helped the Jewish people through the process of Exodus. As they were getting ready to experience the Exodus, the freedom, tefillin was going to help them. And so the Rebbe said in 1967, we're going through the same type of Exodus. Well, we're going through the same type of slavery, meaning being surrounded by our enemies around us. And we're hoping to go through the same level of Exodus, being freed from our enemies. So just like tefillin was a key point at the point of redemption, and we'll soon figure out why it was a key point at the point of redemption, so too it should be a key point in 1967 to protect our brothers and sisters in Israel. That's the connection that the Rebbe tied it into. And he continues in his talk, and he says, this is also the response to those who protested, and people were questioning, why did he choose to single out one specific commandment from among all the commandments? Why tefillin out of everything? And the answer, as I explained on several occasions, he says, is that I am not the one who singled it out. It was the Torah that said that the entire Torah is equated with tefillin. This was not said with regards to the rest of the 613 commandments, only with regard to a select few. Torah also makes a special distinction for the commandment which was transmitted before the giving of the Torah and even before the Exodus. Anyway, the Rebbe says here that he wasn't the first one to introduce tefillin. Tefillin is a key player in the observance of mitzvahs, the observance of Torah. Torah is equated to tefillin, which we have to figure out why. It was used at the time of the redemption out of Egypt, and so too is going to be used to help us through calamities and tragedies and difficult times, such as the Six-Day War of 1967, which ended up being a miraculous time as well. Now, what is the keystone? What is the cornerstone? What is the key element of tefillin? And why is it so important? And why is it so relevant to freedom and to the Exodus? So I'm going to take you through to the following source. All right, here we are. So, and this is very relevant to both men and women. As I said, even though practically the mitzvah is observed by men, I think the message is quite relevant to women as well, and very practical too. What do we say here? Let's read the Alter Rebbe in the Code of Law. The Jewish Shulchan Aruch writes, when donning tefillin, one should have in mind that we were commanded by God to write these 4 passages which speak about the oneness of his name and the exodus from Egypt. And here comes our key point for today, and to place them on our arm next to our hearts. That's where the tefillin shel yad is put, on our arm next to our hearts, and on our heads next to our brains. The tefillin is put on the heart, the tefillin is put on the mind. Why is that? So that we will constantly remember the miracles and wonders he did for us, which indicate his greatness, and that he has the power and authority to do as he wishes to the heavenly spheres and on earth. And here comes the message. One should dedicate his soul, which is in his mind, and the lusts and the desires of his heart to the service of God. Through donning tefillin, he will remember the Creator and minimize his physical indulgences. So now you see what the purpose of the tefillin is. The purpose of the tefillin is actually to tap into our intellect. The purpose of tefillin is to tap into our emotion. So we have the tefillin shel yad, which is put on the arm. And we have the tefillin shel rosh, which is actually put on the head. Whether we are emotional people or whether we are intellectual people, tefillin enables us to focus and understand the purpose of why we do it. To focus and understand the purpose of what our goal and what our role is. Now, as you know, we don't stop there. We don't stop at the head or at the heart. The tefillin shel yad, the straps of the tefillin shel yad, actually are wrapped all the way down the bicep to the arm onto one's hand as well. Right? So tefillin actually starts from the head, from one's intellect. Then you've got the tefillin shel yad opposite the heart, and then you have the straps that you tie that takes it all the way down to the hand as well. What's the message there? The message is that whether it's our intellect or whether it's our emotion, it's all got to do with action. That's the goal. The goal is to take our intellect and translate that into action. To take our emotion and translate that into action. Just thinking through things brings anxiety. Just thinking through things brings worries and concerns. It all remains hypothetical in our brains. That's not the purpose of the intellect. The goal of the intellect is to translate that into action. And so too the goal of our emotion. If we feel something towards someone or towards something, it's got to translate. Otherwise, it takes up space inside of us. We become emotional balls of fire, but there's no actual tachlis. What's the translation? How do we translate it? How do we implement that? And so the straps of the arm actually show the idea of translating all that into action. This explains why it's so part of the Exodus. Why is it so part of the Exodus? Why was it given to us before we left Egypt as a nation? And the Rebbe also spoke about it in 1967, and he said, every time we want to experience the Exodus, tefillin is that cornerstone, is that key mitzvah that's going to assist us, just like it was in Egypt, so too it should be in 1967 in the Six-Day War, and whenever else it's going to be too. Why is it so important? Because it creates a sense of freedom. It gives us structure. It guides my intellect into a certain direction. It guides my emotions and my heart into a certain direction. It motivates me to translate my intellect and my emotion into action. That's what tefillin does. It guides me and assists me in translating it into action. Now here's an interesting detail within the teachings, within the build-up of the tefillin. We know that in the tefillin, there are 4 pieces of parchment that are written and inserted into the tefillin. Okay? The difference is that in the tefillin shel rosh, in the head tefillin, they're broken up into 4 different pieces of parchment and inserted into 4 different compartments of the tefillin box on top. With the tefillin shel yad, the hand tefillin, is actually one long piece of parchment that's rolled up together and then inserted into one compartment of the tefillin shel yad. So that's the difference in the build-up. With the tefillin shel rosh, the head tefillin has 4 different compartments. The hand tefillin has 1 compartment. Okay, and therefore the tefillin shel rosh, the head piece, has 4 different pieces of parchment, and the hand piece has 1 long strip consisting of 4 different chapters that are written there. So why is it designed? Why is it designed in such a way? So there's a few explanations which I think are quite practical for us to tap into. The first is that there's a major difference between our intellect and our emotion. Our intellect is there to analyze, to dissect, to break down the thought process. And that's why, and that's represented by the 4 different pieces of parchment. Each piece of parchment is another chapter, because that's the process of the mind. The mind is supposed to process things. The mind is supposed to analyze things, whereas the heart loves equally. The emotion connects equally. It's not the role of the heart to start dissecting and analyzing and breaking down the systems and seeing, who is who and how does she look and how does he look and where does he belong to? Where does she belong to? That's not the role of the heart. The heart and the role of the emotion is to love. Unity. Share the love. That's the role of the emotion. It's the role of the mind to ask questions, to understand, to analyze. And that's why the piece of parchment in the hand is one long piece. It's united. It's one long piece because we love equally. We love everyone equally. But the head is analytical, and it should be. And therefore, it's divided into 4 different pieces of parchment representing the analytical mind of each person. There's another beautiful insight into this. And that is that, and let me just go back to that point for one more moment. Some of us are stronger with our emotions, and some of us are stronger with our minds, i.e., some of us are naturally loving, emotional people, and we hate analyzing and dividing and interrogating because we just love. But at the same time, over emotion or overreaction to an emotion without intellectual input is not ideal. It's not complete. And vice versa. Some of us are intellectually analytical with not much emotion involved. And sometimes we show emotion to one particular person, sometimes we don't show emotion to another particular person. It's also not ideal. It's important to find that balance of when is it time to express my emotional love and unity, and when is it time to debate. And there's times for everything. And some of us are naturally stronger in this area, and some of us are naturally stronger in that area. Okay, that's the first point. The second point is, and this is so relevant to South Africa, of what we've been going through now. The second element is that there's a difference between the way the mind works and the way the heart works. In the mind, it's compartments, 4 different compartments. Why? Because intellectually, idealistically, we're allowed to differ. I can have a different ideology to you, and you can have a different ideology to someone else, and that's okay. It's okay to differ intellectually. It's okay that I have one piece of parchment or one way of thinking, and you have another piece of parchment. You have another way of thinking. And that's perfectly fine. We don't all have to subscribe to the same way of thinking. We don't all have to subscribe to the same ideology. That's true. On one condition. What's the condition? That we can love each other nonetheless. We have to love each other, even if we disagree, even if we don't believe the same intellectually. When it comes to the heart, we can love each other. It's such a powerful thought, because naturally as human beings, we think that our heart is dependent on our mind. And it is, there's obviously a link. But we think that the way we think has to filter down in the way we feel. Phil's saying not the case. The way you think, you can differ in opinion. You can have your 4 parts of the Shema or the other paragraphs on each unique parchment. But the way you feel is one long piece of parchment. You're all connected. You're all united. It's such a relevant message for today. We can get along. And that's why South Africa is so special. That's why South Africa is so unique. Is because we live in a rainbow nation, and the rainbow nation means we don't all agree to the same ideology or religion or belief system. But it's a rainbow nation because we can live side by side, or we should be able to live side by side and to love each other and embrace one another, just as the Tefillin Shel Yad indicates. And then, obviously, to translate that into action, which is represented by the straps that go down the arm. I'm sorry, I keep on lifting my right arm to you because I'm a lefty. And therefore, as lefties, we put on our tefillin on the right arm, even though generally the righties will put on tefillin on their left arm. Interesting that we actually start our tefillin with our hands, with the arm. Well, we start with the heart, right? We start with our hearts. We start with the emotion and the action, so the straps, and then we get to the head because the order, right? We start with the arm and then we get to the head. And in fact, what happens at the end, we go vice versa. We take off the head first and only then take off the arm. What's the message? The message is that your love and your heart is the most important, and action. The emotion and the action are the most important. That's the heart and the arm. That's the most important part of Judaism. The emotional connection to each other, to God, to religion, to Judaism, and the action of implementing it. So when does the mind kick in? When does the analytical part of us kick in? Secondary. Once you're connected, once you're emotionally connected, then comes the point in time where you can start asking questions. It relates to Matan Torah. We actually read about the Ten Commandments this week in the laning as well, when the Jewish people said, Na'aseh v'nishma. First we'll do, and then we'll understand. So first we have the emotional connection, the bond to God, the action, and then comes the mind. We start with the hand, and then comes the mind. And then what's fascinating is we take off the tefillin shel rosh first, and we leave on the yad, the hand stays on. So we start with the hand, and we finish with the hand. And the head is somewhere in the middle, leaving us with that message that what's most important is the emotional connection, is the love, is the unity, and the action that comes together with that. Secondary to that, and while it's still important, let's not belittle the role the mind or the intellect plays, but secondary to that is the intellectual mind of ours, and that's the advantage of learning. Thank you for coming online today, and thank you for listening in, because that's the role. We can't only be emotional people, right? Most Jews feel Jewish and love being Jewish, but how much do we actually understand of our Judaism? That's a major question. So the purpose of coming on to a shiur online like this is to educate ourselves and inquire or listen or question or ask. And it doesn't just start with my session this morning. Hopefully what we're going to do in this session is trigger our thought process. So the rest of the day, we're actually thinking about this balance of emotional and intellectual. So when you meet your child or your student or your friend today, or you speak to them on the phone, ask them the question: are you naturally emotional or are you naturally intellectual? Which one is your strong point? What we need to do is we need to have a balance of both. And this ties back to our original question or original statement. God gave the Jewish people the mitzvah of tefillin before Shema was written. He gave them the mitzvah of tefillin before they left Egypt, because he told them, if you want to be free, follow this step. How many self-help books are there today helping people think properly, or helping people feel properly, have emotions? How many self-help books are there? How many therapists are helping people through this process of how to think positively, how to feel positively, how to get up and do, and not just lie in bed and think? Torah has been addressing these issues for millennia. As we get going out of the exodus out of Egypt, God tells us, take the tefillin with you, the message of tefillin. Understand the role that the heart plays, the unity, the love. Understand the role that the mind and the brain play, the analytical, the idealistical, the understanding. And then translate that into action, which is the tefillin shel yad. There's such critical points. And hopefully what we've done today is just made ourselves more aware of those elements within us. I don't think in half an hour we can possibly address the issues of the intellect, the issues of the emotional, and the issues of the action fully. But we can definitely create a sense of awareness. That's what we've done today, a sense of awareness. And to ask ourselves the question, which one are we more naturally? And how can we supplement that? And how can we balance a balance of all three aspects, intellectual, the emotional, and the action in our lives too, represented by the mitzvah of tefillin that we address in this session. So just before I log off the Zoom call, those on Zoom, just stay with me for a moment. I'm going to say goodbye to those of us that are on social media, on Facebook. and have a wonderful day. And we'll be back here Wednesday morning, 10 o'clock for Practical Parsha.